coming out this evening to listen to this, what's going to be, what we promise will be an amazing conversation about my new book, Table for One. I want to introduce Prashant Sankaran, who, above all else, he's my very good friend. He is also a writer, a storyteller, poet, photographer. He wears multiple hats, and he also leads a business in diversity and inclusion. And Prashant will be leading today's conversation.
Thank you, and delighted to be here. Whenever Sumaa talks about her friends, she really gets very eloquent and very generous. So you need to take all that with a pinch of salt. But today I am actually going to be quite harsh on her and ask her very difficult questions. And we will also open up, part of the evening for everybody to ask questions, so that whatever we have, not just about the book, but also about Sumaa as a writer, her craft, the process she uses to write. I think all of that will be useful to us. So with that, let's start. The first thing when anybody looks at this book, and many of my friends who have told them to buy the book and bought the book, they were all saying, look, the best thing that we saw when we looked at the book was the title. So, Table for One, because that's something that we use very naturally. We use very often, whether you are single or married, because many a time you go to a restaurant on your own, and people will ask, so say Table for One or Table for Two. So, but how did this become the title? What was the starting point? How did it get triggered for you?
Yeah, so when the idea for this book emerged, the first chapter that I wrote was about food. At least the maternal side of my family, and my two cousins are here, they know how obsessed that side of the family is with food. And looking at solo living, cooking for one is an extremely difficult thing to do. Because no matter how much you try to cook, you end up cooking, for a small country, like my friend Prashant here likes to say. And then you end up, you don't want to waste, so you end up eating, like the same thing over 2-3 days and all of that. So I wanted to bring out the process of what it's like to run a kitchen for one person. And in the process of writing that chapter, one of the subheads that came out was Table for One. And that stuck. My editor really liked it. In the revisions of the book, in many iterations, that came out as really holding the essence of what I was wanting to say throughout the book. Holding that idea of solo living together. Many people even, like you have pointed out the title as being quite catchy. That they wanted to pick up the book because the title was attractive. But there's one anecdote, Prashant, which I want to share, which stands out from everything else I've heard about what people think about when they say Table for One. And this came from a dear friend of mine who's from an army family, And he said the memory that is evocative for him when we talk about Table for One comes from the military dining hall. Okay, so in an army, in a typical army dining hall, so you have tables, you have, it might be a restaurant kind of seating, or it might be long benches like a mess or whatever it is. But in every army officer's dining hall, in every corner, in one corner of that hall, they have a table for one which is set up. It has, a nice white sheet on top. It has, a small vase with a fresh wild red rose, a candle which is lit, and a table which is set for one person to dine. And he told me that that table is dedicated for prisoners of war because they are forgotten. we always, we celebrate the martyrs. We, we celebrate the victors of war, but we don't do enough, or we don't remember prisoners of war. And that one table for one is a reminder that prisoners of war are also to be celebrated, which isn't directly linked to solo living per se, but that that connection to table for one was very, very powerful for me.
Okay, we can't hear. Okay, so I'll try to.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it also was in a way, like a metaphor for living alone, right? Because you have this table, and you have all the freedom to order what you want. You don't ask anybody else's opinion. Also, you can invite whoever you want to sit at the table if you feel like that. And sometimes you might feel like having a glass of wine. Sometimes you might, and it's up to you, right? So in a way, I think the title also reflects the essence of the book in many ways. So that was one lovely thing. Then moving into the book, because I'm not really going to get into the specifics of what is in the book or asking her to read out parts of the book, because I think everybody should buy a copy and read it. So I'm just going to touch upon the themes which are in this book and see how we can get a little deeper and listen to Sumaa's thoughts on this. So when we start the book, one of the first things that we talk about is the marriage and the separation, right? And at that time, I think you were around 30.
Yes.
And you had your own life experiences. You had lived abroad, and so you were not typical. Maybe I'm using the wrong word. A naive young girl who is pushed into something, right? So, how did that happen? That decision happen, and because that also survived only very short time.
Yeah.
So, in a way, was singledom a response to that, or was it something which inherently you are more comfortable with?
Yeah, that's a good question and a difficult one to answer. But I want to tackle the first part of that question, which is about marriage and what we think of it, how we tend to slot it in this space of being a traditionalist's option. I kind of disagree with that because I feel marriage can be defined differently for different people, and my choice to get into it came from also a progressive mindset, because there were two things to it. One was an optimism, hoping for an equal partnership, and second, it was foolishness. So you've got to be a fool to get into marriage. So you've got to be an idiot at some level, right? So I was a bit of both. I was both an idiot, and I was also hopeful and optimistic that it's going to be an equal partnership. But very soon, when I found out that it's not going to be an equal partnership, I stepped out. And that stepping out, I think, is what the progressive mindset is, which, many people get stuck in that space, and then that festers and that goes on for years and decades, and then
And
till the
in
end of
different
life.
parts of the book, you do touch upon that in terms of people sort of compromising on things.
Yes.
And going with that.
Yeah.
So once you choose singledom, right? What was the first that phase of that? One of course is to come to terms with being alone, staying alone, all of that. Along with that, was there still a thing that sooner or later, like you said, you are expecting an equal partnership? If I do find an equal partner, I might someday go back. I'm also asking that to get into the mind of people who choose to be single. Is that a temporary phase that slowly becomes permanent, or is it that it's a choice and saying, look, I prefer this, not because that Mr. Right or Miss Right has not come my way, but
Yeah, for me, I can speak from my experience. For me, I was never rigid about wanting to remain single or wanting specifically to want partnership. So for me, what was important was to hold on to my free spirit and my sense of um, propriety, my agency, my freedom. So if a partnership came along which um, fit in with that idea of free spiritedness and the freedom that I embody, I wasn't against the idea of a partnership. It just happened that, I didn't find that equality. Um, so as a result, as time passed, I embraced my single status more and more and more, and began to enjoy it rather than thinking, oh, what a misfortune that I'm single. You think there's something wrong with being single because partnership is elevated as the ideal, form of living, which I questioned a lot because I personally didn't believe in it because I'm having a damn good time being single. So why wouldn't I enjoy it?
You would be envied actually.
Yeah. Yes. I admit.
How many of us in this group are single and stable? Pretty good. Should I ask how many of the group are married but want to be?
Yeah, why not?
Uh, yeah. Now getting into the part of the book, because one beautiful thing about the book is that while it talks philosophically about some of these things, it also talks about very practical, day-to-day kind of issues that people face when they're single. Like as I was coming here, I got a message from a close friend of mine who's in Pune, saying that I have to vacate the house because the landlord is selling it, and now I'm finding it difficult to find a place because single woman, 2 dogs, nobody wants to give me a flat, you know. So are those things like that that first, you had to navigate,
Yeah.
and how was that experience of the nitty-gritty of staying alone?
Yeah, it is actually much more difficult than we care to admit. And I feel not enough people talk about it because still there is that stigma of being single. And being single is seen only as a temporary phase. It's not seen as a state of mind that you can be in and you can be comfortable in it for as long as you want to be in it. Right? So, in that state, when you're going out trying to rent a place, when you're trying to make yourself comfortable in a living situation alone, whether in an apartment complex or in an independent house, society can be quite cruel. Okay, and I've seen this happen to a lot of my friends. And I think I learned very quickly from their experiences, one. And secondly, for me personally, my way out of navigating this issue of wanting to live alone with my family was to buy a house. You buy a house and then you say, okay, this is mine, I'm not going to rent it to someone. So then you negotiate. So that became my bargaining chip, and that became the reason why I could say, okay, I want to make this my home and my space.
Yeah, but for many people who cannot really afford that, right? So that still becomes a struggle. And that I think is also not just about ladies, it's also sometimes about men as well, who are single and want to, it's the resistance towards giving it to a bachelor.
Yeah, men actually have it a lot more difficult because I have spoken to other single men who live solo, both here in Bombay, in Delhi, and other places, and they have it a lot more difficult than me. I mean, maybe not in terms of like, not to compare like that, but they do have issues which are starkly different from what women face. Um, because with men somehow it's not seen as a temporary phase, it's seen as some state of, oh, a bachelor pad, a thing of, oh, he's
Late
getting
night,
into
late
a,
night parties.
yeah, this, it's going to be a pad for debauchery and whatnot, and I don't want, my house to be that way. With women, it's different issues.
Um, when once you get into the administrative side of things, and you had mentioned about, even the local BBMP people coming, etc., etc. In those kinds of things, and especially when there's a crisis, right, an accident happens or whatever. In those kind of moments, have you thought that if I had a partner, somebody to share this kind of a difficulty or a burden or whatever, it would be easier than staying alone?
No. In fact, those difficult experiences made me want more than ever to continue to remain single, or continue to live alone. Um, I didn't think that having a partner would actually ease those situations. And I was angry because, I mean, what are we doing here? We are giving a man a higher status in the house. If you remember that anecdote where, these BBMP officials, they come and they say, where is the Sar, Paul Sar? I'm like, I am the Sar of this house. I'm the house owner. So, what are you talking about? This is the attitude. I didn't want to fall into that trap of, this.
No, I was more also maybe referring to things like, suppose a person staying alone, for example, slips and falls down and breaks his or her leg, for example, right? Now, during that time, of course, there's family or what who will come and help, but it's not maybe like somebody who's with you. Those kind of times, does it sort of the thought comes saying that maybe
Of
I'm just
course.
trying to probe.
Yeah, of course, why not? Of course, it does come up once in a while, and not just, it doesn't have to be necessarily in a crisis situation. The desire for companionship, somebody to even share a joke with in a largely empty day with a lot of silence around you, is tempting. And that for me in the last 10 years has been largely a matter of getting used to it. And that has made me also understand and value sharing with other people, because I knew that because there's no ready partner available here to share all the time, the sharing that I took up voluntarily when I went outside with friends became more valuable to me, and the quality and the nature of that sharing increased multiple fold, because that there's no ready.
Actually, that was my next question. Like,
Oh.
you have written about space and silence, and
Yeah.
So when you are alone in the house and you're seeing a beautiful Netflix movie, or you're watching a match and you see Messi had scoring that last minute goal or whatever, right? So at that point of time, I think it's different for different people. Like, I am very comfortable doing it alone, but I can also appreciate that people might want to share that special moment, right? Those are the times maybe it does occur that if somebody is there with you.
Yeah. Here I think it matters whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, and how much of that sharing is valuable to you in your own internal life, and how much of it you want to share outside externally with people. On that note, I want to talk about how sharing is overrated as a concept today. In an Instagram fueled world, we share every moment of every day. We want to share how we feel, we want to share a picture of the coffee we are drinking, we want to share how much traffic there is on the street, what I'm feeling right now, oh, I had a cough, etc., etc. And I feel that somewhere the quality of our conversations, the quality of our relationships is being affected by that oversharing. And I feel that my experience of living alone has somewhat put perspective to that aspect of how much sharing is really valuable and how much of it is high quality sharing. Like you, I also indulge in staying in the moment. When Messi hit that final goal in the World Cup, for example, I was overcome with joy. It was a special moment because we knew that moment is not going to come again, right? But for me, it was not important that there's nobody to share it with. I was reveling in that joy, and that was enough. Because you're in the moment and you're happy, and then later, yes, you're sharing it on WhatsApp, you're talking to friends about it, and that's totally
But
fine.
social media sharing is more a projection, right? What do you want to project that you want people to know about you or how you are, you tend to share that.
Yeah.
But that's maybe a little different from sharing something which is special for you. But anyway, so because I'm reminded that I had a very long bachelorhood, and during that time I had a pet cactus. You also have? Oh, lovely. So I used to share things with the pet cactus. So I used to talk to it after coming back from work and things like that. So is there a surrogate way like I did with the cactus that you have thought of, for example, having a pet, having a fish bowl, having another living being in the house?
Yeah, I've tried fish, they keep dying. I have lots of plants. I have about 40 plants that I nurture and care for. I talk to them every morning, but it's not in the kind of sharing that you refer to now here. That kind of sharing I do in my writing. So for me, that becomes my companion. I write a lot. I fill up entire notebooks very quickly within weeks. So for me, the quality sharing and indulging my own mind and thoughts comes there. And for me, having another person to share with is a bonus, but it's not a must-have. It's a nice to have.
So many of my single friends who are working on full-time jobs, they have shared many times that look, in any case we are spending so much time with people all through the day, and when we come back home, it's actually a blessing to have some silence, some space, and all of that. But there are also a lot of people who are not on full-time jobs and on very flexible kind of things, and that's when the silence is actually long and solitude is actually quite heavy at times, right? So especially for people like that, people like you, for example, how did you navigate through the pandemic when even whatever little social contact that we had was sort of cut off?
Yeah, so for me, this transition happened many years ago, more than 12 years ago. When I was working in the media industry, I used to work 12 to 16 hours a day in a very, very extremely noisy newsroom where you heard sounds all the time. You're just, assaulted by multiple senses. There's a printer, there's phone calls, there's someone shouting from one end of the newsroom. There's just noise around you all the time. And then you come back home and you want that silence. But my living alone journey started at a time when I made that transition out of the media industry into the corporate world, where I was working for an American organization remotely, which means I was working from here, flexi time. Okay, I didn't even have regular working hours. The only thing I had was meetings, with them, and those were like a couple a day, and that's that. So I had pretty much, those 24 hours in a day to do as I please in the silence of my house, and that environment being completely different from the work environment, the rush, and people around me all the time. That was the transition I came into. So the initial years of my living alone were quite challenging, because even for someone who appreciates of space like me, and I love my space, I love the silence, I had to grow into it, and it had to become an acquired quality, and I had to learn to appreciate that silence. I had to learn. It was a learned experience. It's not something that you just, it's not who you are.
Yeah,
Exactly, right? So for me, those 2-3 years were very, very different, because I think majority of my spiritual growth also happened in those first 2-3 years. Compare that to the pandemic. Okay, so by the time the pandemic hit, I was already 10 years into living alone. I loved the pandemic. Absolutely loved it, because there was no pressure to go out, no pressure to meet anyone. My most creative work happened during the pandemic, where I had complete control of my time. I had complete control of my energy, my time. I was not sharing it with anyone. That energy was completely spent on creating something, and the books came out of that period. So, yeah.
I think that's wonderful to hear. I think that's also a reflection maybe of the kind of, you know, emotional balance we possibly reached at that point of time. So that balance was actually productive, it was rich, and it actually brought out a lot of creativity. Okay, I'm going to shift gears and go into a little more interesting things like romance and friendship and things like that. So one of the things that people say is that when it comes to friendships and romance, you respond to vibrations, or you respond to chemistry of people that you meet. And as a single person, there would be a lot more of that directed towards you. When people see another single person, right? So how do you navigate through that? How do you look at what you really need? Do you set boundaries? Do you set, like checkpoints? Or do you plunge into things impulsively? What makes you think that?
Yeah, a lot of unwanted attention definitely comes your way, and I'm going to say it openly on this public platform. I get a lot of dick pics in my DMs on social media every other day. Yeah, delete. It's a headache. But when it comes to people who want to seriously pursue you, I think using my own intuition has been very, very important through that whole process, because I had to say no more than I've had to kind of see, if there's something there, and most often there isn't anything. So that becomes a very difficult part of life to navigate when you're living alone, because there's this space which is completely in your control. And then when you develop an interest with someone, there is a temptation to use your own space to indulge that possible romance, or to see where it goes. And that's where boundaries come in. And over the years, I've seen that I've put stronger boundaries around my house and who I allow into my personal space. And that's also a process of learning. It just doesn't come overnight, and you just don't know how to say no in the beginning. You just have to learn your lessons, go through whatever experiences, and then you learn to recognize the bullshit.
No, but in terms of romance and staying single, right? I mean, romance can be without a destination as well. romance can be a wonderful relationship which is romantic, but not necessarily culminating in a partnership. So, is that something which, for example, is accepted in that sense? Or is it that every romantic engagement that you have, there's an expectation that it leads to a destiny?
I think this is a more philosophical kind of question, and it differs from person to person. Some people are more open to, engaging with the possibility and staying with the idea that a short-term romance can fulfill you. For me, it has been up and down. I haven't really found the joy in it that much, so I haven't indulged it that much.
And what about friendships other than romance? How does that work? How does, whatever you call it, we are just friends, or we have a platonic relationship, right? And many a time people put those labels because, like for example, somebody says, I saw you with this girl in this pub, and then they immediately react, oh, we are good friends. Is there a need for that explanation? Is there a need for that label? Is there a need for that justification? Or does friendship actually get into those boxes?
Yeah. Here I found it useful to pretend that you're deaf and you don't kind of hear most of the noise around the gossip and the rumors, because that for anybody who's single, the idea that that she might be dating someone or she might be seeing someone, even if it is just a friend, it becomes a big thing, bigger than it should be. It becomes a big thing in other people's minds than it is in yours. So I've learned to ignore most of it, and that also is a learned experience. We practice how to ignore it. Many of my male friends visit me, and I think I've trained my building also to ignore it, because not everything is about it's going somewhere, oh, is she getting married, oh, is this. Now they've stopped. So
When, like, I've been married 32 years, okay, so that's a very long time. And there are times when you also want your solitude, you want your space. For example, in my case, I sort of dealt with it by having a den for myself. I go and spend time there, like 4 or 5 days at a stretch. I do my writing or whatever there and things like that. There are single friends of mine who have said, look, they do sometimes miss the family kind of a surrounding, and because there is also a value of or a joy from that aspect. Right? So from both sides, for example, married people sometimes need space, need to be experienced that little sliver of singledom, for example. And similarly, I've heard a couple of my single friends say, and there's one of them, I think you have met him as well, who sort of comes and spends time in my house, because he says, when I'm spending time with you and your family, I feel that I'm part of an extended family. Does that kind of a thing actually, is that a need that you need to sometimes have that kind of experience? Do you get pulled into feeling part of a unit and experience that, enjoy that?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the desire for community and the desire for social experiences is very much an intrinsic part of, I think, who we are as a species. That doesn't take away from the experiences, though, of being solo and having a very strong identity as a single person. So for me personally, how it's been is that I dip into these social experiences, I enjoy them in that moment, and I extract myself from there pretty quickly, because eventually I've learned over the years that that's who I am also. I cannot, stay in that, indulge myself in social space for too long because I need my personal space a lot.
So, just now in an extension of that, there are single women friends of mine who have said sometimes they don't feel as welcome in a family setting as much as a man sometimes would be, a single man would be welcome in a family. Is there a truth in it, or is it just a perception that
Um, for me, I have not experienced anything like that. And even with my male single friends, they have not experienced it. I feel it's the opposite. I feel it is our singles who are very choosy about where we go because we don't necessarily understand talk of family
children?
politics and children and mothers-in-law and this, and we don't understand it. So we don't want to be pulled into it. So it is the singles actually who are more choosy about that, and we have the option to be choosy. So it's the other way around.
What about the support of the sisterhood? Is there a like a bond of sorts? Single women connecting together, helping each other. Is there a sisterhood which is active? Is there a sisterhood which is not very visible, but if you need it, it is there? Or it is a myth that there's a sisterhood and there is really, it doesn't exist?
I've had personally a very checkered relationship with sisterhoods. It for me, I think more than the group energy, it is the individual one-on-one relationship that matters a lot and is very important. So a sisterhood in that sense where you have a group of women holding each other, supporting each other, while I believe that it can happen, it's also a matter of luck. Like as in marriage, finding a good spouse is a matter of luck. Finding a good sisterhood which is supportive is also a matter of luck. And I have not exactly been that lucky. For me, the one-on-one relationships with women or men, they have worked wonders.
Much better.
Much better.
Now, you also follow a spiritual path, and your first book is about that journey, right? So, being single, has it enabled you to go deeper into the spiritual path as opposed to if you have been a householder, for example?
Yeah.
How is that played out?
Yeah, I think my solo lifestyle, if it has enriched any part of my life most, it is my personal spirituality, because my personal spirituality has bloomed and grown multifold because I am able to indulge that internal life in my own space in the way that I want, with the energy that I have. So my intuition has grown, my ability to be balanced has grown, my ability to see things clearly has grown. A lot of it is about being spiritual. So that aspect of my life has really taken off from this solo lifestyle, and I feel that that in turn has fed my my faith in solo living so much that I believe that there's a lot that living alone can do for you, which is why, which is where the idea for the book, really came about, because I feel that there's so much to gain from spending extended periods of time with yourself. There's a lot of healing that happens, there's a lot of self-reflection, self-understanding that happens. And if you're an artist especially, or if you're in any form of creative work, that gets enriched multifold by solo living. So my spiritual life has grown tremendously because of solo living, and then now I love solo living because of the spiritual being that I am.
No, that's, I think one can understand that. Now, moving away from the content of the book to you as a writer, when did you start writing? I mean, I know that as a journalist, you always spoke, but writing not in terms of even a framework, like as a job, when you want to write to express yourself, like, when did that start? Was that a specific trigger, and what was your journey as a writer?
Yeah, so anybody who reads books from a young age wants to be a writer, wants to at least write one book in her life. So for me also, from when I was very young and I started reading books, I had the dream of writing books. But the actual concrete vision of that came before me. If I had to put a date on it, it was sometime in 2013 when I went through quite a spiritual churn at that time. You know, my personal spirituality was really growing at that time, and I needed an outlet. I had to process that spiritual life of mine, and that's when I started writing in a very, very disciplined manner. You know, daily. You know, butt on the seat, 1 hour, sit and write. And if nothing came, I would still sit for that 1 hour. So I put myself through that very rigorous exercise. And it took that many years actually to build a structure and, you know, come out. So these are lived experiences. But to bring them out, I've had to, you know, get into the practice of daily writing, get into the rigor of it, the discipline of it, the rhythm of it. And this came, both of them actually are pandemic babies. So the inner light, the idea came to me at the start of the pandemic, and in the first lockdown is when I wrote the first draft of it. The writing happened within 1 month, flat, just because I had the idea in my head going on and on and on for years. It was going on in my head and it was churning. But before this, I'd written another book, and you know about that. It is my solo travels. It's about my solo travels, and that is yet to be published. That came before the pandemic, and that was also a matter of living those experiences and telling the story. So, yeah.
So one is it's lived experiences. You know, in this. You are referred to me, for example, as a feminist, right? So, is there a feminist ideology or feminist stance that you want to express, especially from this as a writer? Like some of the writers get termed as feminist writers. Some of the writers own up and say, "Yeah, I am a feminist." And I read very recently the Kerala Health Minister Shailaja Purushottam in an interview. She said, "Look, I'm a feminist, but I'm not an active feminist. I'm not an activist feminist." So is there something like that which also influences your writing, in the sense that I'm also wanting to influence a body of people through a particular ideology which I stand for?
Yeah, so these labels actually really confuse me. So I don't know if I'm a feminist. What I do know is that I don't want anybody else coming and telling me how I should live my life. And no woman in this world should be told how she should live her life. No woman in this world should be told what she should wear, or who she should go out with, or what she should eat, or whether she should abort her baby or not. That I very strongly believe in. The woman's full autonomy and agency over her own body, over her own mind, and over her life choices. So if you're going to call that feminism, okay, maybe. But labels I don't
So
like.
why did you call me a feminist?
Because I believe, I think for men it's more important than it is for women. Because the way men position themselves from the outside when they look at a woman's life, I think is more important than what women are doing for themselves. And I see you doing that from a quiet, safe distance, but with so much strength, that I wish more men would do that for me.
Let's move to.
Did I make you uncomfortable now?
Too eloquent.
Okay. So, lived experiences get articulated like in these two books, and we are looking forward to your travel book to come out. All these are, in a, as a genre, non-fiction, right? Lived experiences also get expressed in different ways in fiction. So, when is your fiction book?
If all goes well, I want my next book to be a fiction.
After the travel.
After the travel one, and I have another one after that, which is commissioned by my publisher. So that'll be then my fifth book. My fifth book, I wanted to be a fiction book. And you know this, so I'm going to say it. This is something I've been working on since 2018. Made tons of notes, made charts, I have my characters in my head, it's growing, and I know who they are, I know how they think, what they wear, how they live, how they breathe, and but I need, I think, a different kind of rhythm and a different kind of discipline to be able to write fiction. I may be wrong because I haven't yet written a full-length fiction work. Yeah, we'll talk about that when I write that.
How many of people here write, not as a job, not as a journalist, but as an author? Not necessarily a book, but write poetry, write fiction. One? Anybody else? No? Yes? So for you, Sumaa, what is the struggle, or what are the challenges, or what are the differences between when you approach writing a non-fiction and approach writing a fiction?
I feel for non-fiction, the structure is really important. You should know what you want to say. And I think a lot of that comes from a very strong journalistic training. You know your beginning, you know your end, you know your middle, you know what you're going to say, you know what the point of the story is. And that makes, I think, non-fiction a far more structured process of writing, because the creativity then falls within that structured framework, right? With fiction, I don't know. I'm at a loss, because when I look at some of my favorite authors and their process of writing, some of them say that they start a story and they don't know how it's going to end. And that for me is extremely scary, because I've never done that. I've always known what my last chapter is, and I know what I'm going to say in that chapter. For me to start a story and to allow the characters to live it out as I write them out is very scary.
I think we will pause here and throw it open to anybody who wants to ask Sumaa any questions, anything about the book, anything about what we discussed so far, whatever. There's a question there. No. I thought you were going to ask a question. No.
I need to read the book to answer.
Shubha, sorry, I have not read your book. Still, I know you. And you make one, you used one word, I was foolish to marry. It was foolishness to marry. So, your judgment went wrong. You fell in love with the idea of marriage, and then you wanted to promote yourself.
I think so, yeah. I think the idea there is that just how deeply entrenched the idea of marriage is in all of us. So we are brainwashed since we are born that that's the way to live. So we grow up thinking, okay, at this age I'm going to get married and this is how I'm going to live, and that's the format of living, which is what actually I write about in the first chapters of the book. So when I talk about my own foolishness, I mean, it's not personally my foolishness alone. What I was saying is that for anyone to, in their right mind, get into marriage, they have to be a bit of a fool and a bit of an optimist also to get into marriage.
It's like, right?
Yeah, that's what we tell ourselves, isn't it? So that's the extent of what we expect marriage to do for us.
Living alone also, is it, I mean, your parents and your sister, they're all, they may not be with you, but you know that they are with you.
Yes.
Maybe that is making your life, taking easier, or
Is it making?
The life easier.
life is easier. Isn't
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that
It? So
kind
you're
of.
not alone.
No.
So it is only physically your.
Yes. Yes, physically, yes, I live alone, but I do have support in terms of, emotions, in terms of like holding me when I need something, when I need help. They're there. Family is there. So in that sense, I'm not left in the lurch. But even then, that living alone and indulging that time and energy in my own personal space makes my life experience starkly different from if I were co-living with someone.
Next.
I have also not read the book.
Yeah.
But then I just want to know, do you speak to any single women before you read the book to get a perspective of
Tons of
whether
them.
they align with your thoughts?
Yes, tons of interviews. In the course of the book, they may not have been formal interviews where I've said, oh, I'm writing this book and I'm interviewing you for the book, but many of them are friends or friends of friends or people I've known who've had these experiences and they've shared them with me. So in the writing of the book, I have told them that I'm using these anecdotes, I've taken permission from them to use. In a lot of places I've changed names where it might be sensitive. But yes, lots of other experiences also. In that sense, it is part memoir because so much of it is drawn from my own experience, but it's also part research based and it's a part manifesto because it's also useful for someone who's looking to embark on living alone.
Yeah, I have also read many of the reviews, and I can see a lot of people actually sharing, saying that this is how I also felt. So there's a lot of alignment in many people's thoughts now.
I have one question.
Yeah.
It says solo living manual for curious and Indian women.
Yeah.
Can we as men read this book and what do you think we can, what do you think we will take out of this?
That's a great question. One of the pieces of feedback that I've got consistently from many of the people, serious invested readers from this book, is that this book is not just for women, it's for men also, because it's not necessary, even though I've labeled it as a solo living manual, it is so much more than that, because it's about self-reflection, it is about indulging your internal life, it is about who you become when you are alone, and that's not gender specific. The gender specificity comes because I am a woman and this is my lived experience, and also there are some experiences where I share about it being specific to women, but there are many men who have read the book and have resonated with it. Maybe you can share what you felt as a man reading.
Yeah, so like Sumaa said, there are specific experiences that women face, right? Living alone. But a lot of this, for example, there is a section on space, silence, and secrets, for example. I'm just taking that as an example. Now that could resonate with anybody, because when you are alone, you have tons of silence which you sort of have to navigate through. Either embrace it, be comfortable with it. How do you fill up those spaces when you are alone? How do you share your space? Whether you are a man or a woman, you might do it differently. Like for example, I talked about like I have created this den for myself. I don't allow anybody, and I have a lot of friends. But I would say in the last 5 years, maybe 6 people would have visited me in that case, right? Between men and women, right? So how do you keep those boundaries? And she has also talked about in that particular thing. So there is space, there is silence, there is secrets. What do you share with people when you are single? Right? What part of you want to be open about? Show your vulnerability to another person. All that I think is fairly applicable across. The way we do it might be different.
I have one more question. I'm just 29, not yet married. What kind of impact do you think it would bring on a person like me once I reach this?
Who wants?
Once
Once
he
I
reads
reach
this book,
what kind
Okay.
of
impact would it have?
is this book?
Yeah, I hope I've not put you off the idea of marriage, right? Saying only fools get married. I really wish well for you, and I hope you find your life journey and your perfect life partner. But I think you should read this book before you get married,
Sure.
because it talks about how to retain your individuality, how to retain your sense of self, even when you're in a partnership. And I feel that then enriches your partnership and your married life even more when you understand yourself better and how to make space for yourself and without losing yourself in a partnership, be able to maintain that perfect balance of the self and being together. Like he has his den, you might come up with some other idea of how you want to create that balance for yourself.
Because it's always a question of, that people say exclusivity is stifling, and people also say commitment is comforting, right? So it's a question of how do you balance both. And I got married when I was 32, and then another 31 years of marriage. I can say in my life I have actually had a very half kind of a thing, right? And I think one can actually be comfortable with both. It's a question of being acknowledging what it involves. Both has certain frameworks which you can really be part of and enjoy it. There are also in both, there are things which you don't really like. It's a question of how do you navigate through those and still find joy in everyday things. Anything else? Otherwise, Sumaa, any last pearls of wisdom?
No pearls of wisdom. I hope you all enjoyed this session and it's been a thought-provoking session. I want to thank you all for coming. Many of you are known to me and very dear to me. So thank you for taking the time out to come this evening. I want to thank Prashant for agreeing to do this with me because he's a very reluctant, introvertish kind of person. He doesn't like to be in the limelight, but thank you for doing this for me. And I also want to thank Blossom. I want to thank Mai Gowda for allowing, for giving us this space to have this discussion. He doesn't remember it, but I had interviewed him way back in 2002 about his journey selling books from how he had started, and now look at this beautiful space he has. He has another one down the street. So I'm very happy to be here and to be doing it in this bookstore, which is such a landmark space in Bangalore for readers. And yeah, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.